try to tackle every complaint that we get. And I apologize if we did not get to your complaint, but if you can call me or give me your information today before I leave, I will try to get it addressed. I'm in there working hard. Like I said, I just got a new team in, so it's a thing of us just getting out there and responding to the complaints. We out there, we're tagging vehicles. People have vehicles in areas that should not be expired plates. It states that you should not have an abandoned vehicle in residential areas. So it does not mean that everything that's on that citation or that section code is pertaining to you. It's something within it. You might have 2 flat tires. You might have expired plates. You might have your plate, you have a plate, but you don't have it on the car. So what we do is we go out and tag them. You're either going to get a 72-hour ticket, tag on your vehicle, or a 24-hour. The 24-hour ticket is if you're parked on the grass or across the sidewalk. We have to leave room for the pedestrians or constituents that are walking out there. Be courteous, please do not block the sidewalks for them. Once we do that, we make a list, we turn it over to the Gary Police Department. We give you that time frame. Sometimes if it's over the weekend, you have a little bit more time to work on resolving that issue. But if not, or you having a problem and call me, I work with people. We just go out and just tow people's vehicles. If somebody call me and tell me that they have a vehicle and they're trying to get it and it did not pass emissions, which is causing them not to get their plates, give me a time frame and I will take it off the list and ask the police officers to not tow that vehicle. But you have to work on trying to get that vehicle corrected or take it to a place where it's not in the residential area. We notice that if we got weeds growing up around the vehicle, we know it's been sitting there for a while. Even if it's sitting in your yard, your backyard, you say that's your property, I understand that, but the ordinance says no abandoned vehicles in residential areas. So we ask people to either put it in a garage or have it stored somewhere else, so it won't be an eyesore to other constituents that are around. Like I said, we go out, there is a time process. Once we issue citations, we have to wait till that process is completed before we can go on to the next step. We issue the citations right now for the new court dates. We are in November for the new court dates. I have a slew of cases that's coming up next week, and we already have a stack of them for October. Since the pandemic, the judge did open up more court dates because I was only allowed at that time to use one date in that month to do new citations and violations. But since the pandemic, they have opened it up, so now I communicate with the clerk's office and they give us a couple of more days to work with. So we can only work with what they give us. So that's why it takes a long time for the cases to get in court. Like I say, there's a timing period. Sometimes it can take 30 up to 90 to 120 days. Once it goes through the court procedures, it'll go through collections. If the person hasn't responded, then we have to take another avenue. We'll do UBL. UBL is the unsafe building law, and that where the city can step in and try to take over some of the properties that are not being addressed as quick as they need to be addressed. We cannot, because we are the city, we cannot just go on private property and take over or demolish or cut people's grass. We cannot do that. We have to give the owner a chance to correct their own property. Like I said, we work closely with other departments. Once we get a call, I even get calls from dispatch. I get calls from everyone all day long. So like I said, it's not to shun anyone, but as soon as I can get it, I give it to that inspector for their district, and they take it out, and we handle it as they come in. Yes.
You can just project it.
I think you were kidding about this being a hot topic, but it's a hot topic to me.
Yes, it is.
So many questions. Okay, are these phone numbers yours?
Yes, the one on the top is to my direct office, and the one on the bottom is to the 311, which they take complaints, and they give you a ticket number. It's 881-1311.
Okay, last I knew, we didn't have a code enforcement guy in the first district.
We've had a code enforcement guy in the first district for a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Well, he's been sleeping. What's his name?
Robert Winston.
Can you spell that, please?
Brinson. STON, I'm sorry.
Okay. I cannot find the code on the website. Is the code on the website somewhere? So I know
Which code?
the building code, well, the code, so I know if the neighbor's house is a mess, I can tell what they're violating.
If you go under the Gary City Clerk's office, they have a slew of codes. All the codes, municipal codes are under the Gary City Clerk's office.
Okay, I couldn't find them. Okay, so can you tell me more about the unsafe building? Because our Representative Hatcher, I believe, owns one, and that's ridiculous. So how do we get these houses that are half-built and abandoned, how can we get you to do something about them? It's been there for years.
Okay, so,
Let me just correct that, because to my knowledge, he no longer owns it, so I don't want to, that's something incorrect.
The one on Van whatever, or Vermillion?
I don't-
It's quite a few.
Okay, well, I'm not sure it's an unsafe building, but I'm just always careful about, and I would just ask all citizens that if you're going to refer to someone, I don't want to get into calling names, right? So if you want to know an address, but when we start calling names and other people are here, that's not the environment we want to create. So, but if you want to have a one-on-one conversation about a particular violation, then Ms. Washington can be here to do that, all right?
So I apologize for calling out Ms. Hatcher. She may not own that anymore. There's a house at 9215 Lakeshore Drive that has animals going in and out of it. Is that a code violation?
it's a code violation, depends on, because how far are they away from other residents, for one?
It's right next door. There's a house
Okay, because
10
it
feet
states
away.
that they cannot be more than 200 feet to the next resident
For what?
for the animals to be there.
Okay,
And
so I'm
also,
telling you, 9215, you said be specific. 9215 Lakeshore Drive. So would you rather have us call 311 or call your phone number?
you can call either one, the 311, they want to get to me. They
Okay.
are going to get to me.
And lastly, at least one other person and I have been trying to volunteer since April to help you because we understand you're short-staffed, and I would be happy to make a list of violations. Can that, well, it's my thing, I walk around and I notice. So,
A
can,
list of addresses that have violations?
yeah,
Yeah, you can give those to me.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you for having this meeting, William.
Just talk about, I'm just going to encourage you to be safe. Be safe when you're out there, because some people don't take time, folks take, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but you want to be careful in terms of taking photos of people and stuff. I mean, it can get, even our code enforcement officers sometimes take police with them.
Yes, it just happened this week. One of my inspectors was out taking pictures of a property that got cited. She had 3 females that were ready to attack her because she was out there doing her job. So you do have to be careful out there. We have a lot of people that
These
get
are
mad.
abandoned. Nobody's going to be after me. There's nobody there.
Yeah, well, if they are there.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
First, I want to say 311 does work. Robert is excellent. I've dealt with Robert a lot. My issue tonight is garbage pickup. There is an abandoned house that's getting its garbage picked up. I have to pay for mine, so I'm gonna stop paying and just put my garbage out there, and you're gonna still pick it up.
So you want to, so I would just say this, garbage pickup is obviously controlled by the sanitary district, but that's outsourced to Republic. And to be frank, and I certainly understand your sentiment, I think we have about 10% roughly of property owners who do not pay because if you don't pay, right, we don't want the garbage to continue to build up, right? And so that was a discussion we had when we did the increase. So the sanitary district, about a year and a half ago, I believe, asked the city council to approve an increase because they were being charged by Republic more than the fees that were coming in, right? Because there hadn't been an increase in several years. Part of that increase had to deal with the unfortunate fact that there are about 10% of property owners who don't pay, but they're putting garbage out. That said, we don't want rodents and rats and all the rest if people continue to put it out there and it's not being picked up. So they have the power at the sanitary district to issue liens. I'm right about that, I believe, on those properties. But it's up to the sanitary district to do that when folks have not made their payments. Of course, you can't transfer your house or property and get title insurance until you've covered those bills as well. But it is a big challenge. I feel you, and I thank you for being a payer, but I think collectively, right, the tragedy of the commons, we want as many people as possible to pay so that we don't have an overwhelming amount of garbage.
Yeah, and then they got junk all in the backyard. It's just, it's awful.
You're going to give the address either now or later?
4327 East 12th Place. G
43
116. 4327 East 12th Place.
East 12th Place. Thank you. We have no miss. You're going to stand up? Camille.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into my problem, but I've been dealing with 311 for 3 months. It does not work. It does not work. I'm still trying to get a problem resolved that pretty soon there's gonna be snow on the ground, so it makes no sense. But I was just wondering if you guys had any type of tracking system, because this guy, I've been in my house 26 years, and since the house next to me got sold, it's been 15 years about, and every year I have to call code enforcement about this yard, about this vacant lot. And the only time the people will act is if they come out and get cited. The one guy who did own it would just give me the money, and I'd have my landscaper just cut the grass over there. But now this other guy, I can't even deal with him. And I heard that he's not paying the property taxes because he doesn't want, he sold the house but didn't sell the land. So he didn't sell the yard. I don't know how he could do that. He didn't sell the lot next to it. And he's not paying property taxes on it. So I don't know who's gonna ultimately be responsible for it. But when he comes out, it's like, well, who does he know if you aren't cited and the officer tells them, I'll give you the Friday to cut it, and it's Thursday or Wednesday, and of course it's not gonna get cut, and here we are a month later and it's still not cut. Then the officer, I found out, did cite him, but didn't put the paperwork in the computer, so now we're looking at probably November for, a court date, and if we have to do this every year, his fine should be higher than a first-time offender. If I have to go through this in order to get him just to cut the grass. I mean, the grass is waist high, there's snakes, there's all types of stuff over there, my landscaper said. And, that's encroaching upon my property. I have to have workers come treat the outside of my house. So it's an expense to me, and it's a problem, and I've done what I was supposed to do. I called 311. The first time I called, the beginning of July, they did not give me a ticket number. When I started calling again, did you get a ticket number? No. They gave me a ticket number. Oh, they were so, empathetic, this. And I called week after week. I gave you the sheet, that didn't work. I spoke to my council person, nothing happened there. I went to the deputy mayor, nothing happened there. Then it's like, I emailed him, nothing happened there. Then it's like, well, then let me try going a little bit higher. I don't want to have to call the mayor or anything. So let me, I'm following procedure. And nothing's getting done. And it's like, I'm ready to set the shit on fire. Just pour gasoline on it, at least it'll get cut.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I think I did have a conversation with you, Ms. Camille. I'm gonna, when I leave here, give me your information. I'm gonna come out there myself and look at it and make sure we get it in. Okay? I apologize for that.
Let me just say this, you should call the mayor's office, right? Because they don't report to me, they report to the mayor.
Well, I did call the mayor's office and they referred me to Rachel.
Right,
I spoke to
right.
Rachel, And then Rachel spoke with Millie, and
Right.
I've spoken with Millie.
Right.
And then I didn't hear anything, and it's like, well, let me call back 311. So I called back 311, and they're like, no, nothing's here. And I'm like, well, let me call Rachel again. So I called Rachel, and then I think Miss Lacey in your house and said, well, let me see what's going on. And she went and personally spoke to the officer. She phoned me back and said he didn't put the information in the computer. He has the ticket, but he didn't put it in. So, I mean, this is July. Come on, we're going into October.
So she's going to follow up on it, and there are cracks and gaps in the system. That is
Well,
a
I'm
concern.
just saying, yeah,
Right.
it's not. And I shouldn't have to do that. I mean, typical, I mean, you know.
All right. A question over here? Third Avenue, right? All right.
Thank you for acknowledging it. First of all, and I'm going to make it brief, Ms. Washington, you did bring up my concerns, and these two young ladies, they did acknowledge what you said. 311, for me, it works. I've gone so far as to call police outright because I had activity in a vacant house next to mine. I got a good response. Also, the second concern that I have is the ticketing of vehicles. I've watched the police ticket abandoned vehicle, and I watched the gentleman come home, push it up in the driveway, and scrape the ticket off. And nothing happened after that. So my thing, what I'm concerned about is the follow-up. 311 works, 911 works, but the follow-up is challenging.
Right.
Now, my main concern for coming to this meeting, the abandoned house that I have next door to me, I have maintained that yard for 20 years. The owner lives in California. I got imagine he pays taxes, but I couldn't keep up with the fact. I was informed by the police the last activity was going on in that house was the problem I was making was cutting the grass. So I'm cutting the grass in the front because I don't want mine to look like whatever, but I couldn't keep up with the back. They go in that back and do a lot of things. Evidence is in that house. My biggest concern is my wife, when I'm not at home, going to the garage to go about her business with all of the growth that has gone on. So I'm standing here today to say 311 works, 911 works, but the follow-up is challenging. And the address is 5617 East 3rd Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the thing is, a lot of times when the police officer, once they get the list from us, by the time they get out there, the people have moved the vehicle. They have moved it somewhere else, and they can only go by what's out there by the time they get out there. If the vehicle is legit, they can't do anything about it. But like I said, they move the vehicles around.
That's not the case with this, and I don't mean to be rude.
Okay.
The case with this particular vehicle is they pushed it into the driveway, blocking the sidewalk. When their visitors come, they take up my two neighbors across the street from me, they have the whole block. And I'm saying, why don't you use the whole driveway? If the car doesn't run, push it all the way up, then you can put one car behind it, and you don't have to occupy the whole.
Well, once we've done it, if you can call us if you see something like that, call us, because then it's not tagging the vehicle, it's issuing a citation to the property
I've
itself.
been there for about 8 months.
Okay, you can give me that address, I'll,
Thank you, Ms. Washington.
okay. Next,
Officer Lilly, and then the mayor of Edmond. Ms. Jennifer Cease.
To answer his question, if they scrape off the ticket before the 72 hours and do not correct the violation, we can tow it. So just give us a call back and give us one.
thank you.
And I think to that point, Officer Lilly, I had him tow 3 vehicles, I want to say maybe July. They continued to park on Forest Avenue, lined up, and I was out on my morning walk. repeatedly, and I'm like, why are they, it's a big no parking sign right in front of it, and there weren't enough parks for the apartment building there. And first it was one car, then it was two, then it was three, right? So we did get that taken care of, so I know it can work, and they no longer do that, and they still live in that apartment building.
Right. I did work with one of the officers before she retired. I was constantly tagging cars over by IUN. She told me don't tag them anymore. She came out with me and issued tickets. Tickets are totally different than tagging. They now have to go to court before the judge. So if you see that, I can call an officer out if we have to. We can get it ticketed or a tow. So if you see someone's vehicle that's been tagged and they removed it, call us back out. I'll get an officer out there to help me either ticket it or get it towed.
So what is the process as far as repeat, people that repeat every year, say it's a fan hire, or, I know you all probably don't have anything to do with that, y'all just do the job and then it goes to the court and stuff up to the judge.
Right. So, to my knowledge, I know once a year. During that year, if they get cited more than once, of course, the fine can go up. But once the year starts over, they start over with the fine. Yeah, so I have nothing to do with that.
What who do?
Yeah.
The courts do, Supreme Judge, the state judge, city court. Yeah. It's something that they will deal with. I can only do what they tell me that I can do. So,
Is it under the preview of the city, or is it under the preview of the county, or in order to?
The city has a fee ordinance and a fine ordinance, which we review every year. And so there are some things we can't do in terms of the process, right? As dictated by state law, which the courts follow. But in terms of the amount of money for the violations, that requires a vote of the council. So it is something that is looked at every year. Okay, so I wanted to acknowledge, thank you, Ms. Washington, and she has a really tough job, as you can imagine, and we'll talk a little bit about the budget later, but one of the challenges we have is retaining and recruiting employees to be inspectors. So we're currently paying roughly under $31,000, $32,000 per year for a full-time job, right? And that's obviously not a lot of money in any economy, and certainly not in this economy with all the inflation. And the fact that there are many jobs that are paying way more, right? They require much less stress. So I definitely want to thank her and her team. I think there's 3 vacancies. 2. There's 1 vacancy now, so 2 have been filled, and we are looking to make increases in the budget. But of course, when we increase in one place, we have to find somewhere else to decrease, right? And that's the budget struggles that we face. But that notwithstanding, every city employee, as it currently stands, we're looking at doing 3% raises just to keep up with inflation, because we're losing tons of employees, not just police and fire, our regular civilian employees, and when many of them who've been with the city 20 and 30 years retire, you cannot replace them at the salary at which they retired. So that is an ongoing issue, but I continue to thank her team, and we all have to be in this together. So that is the unfortunate consequence of being in a low property tax state. I'm not going to get into that, but that's the reality. It's great to pay 1%, but that means you're going to get that equivalent in terms of city services because the resources are simply not always sufficiently there. I do want to acknowledge State Representative Reagan Hatcher. Something must have ringing in your ears. Your name was mentioned earlier, but she is here. I did not text. You all saw me. I did not text or call State Representative Hatcher, but she is here and is a great colleague. Works very hard on behalf of the city and citizens of Gary, Indiana, and lives here in the 1st District in a very beautiful home. So thank you, Representative Hatcher, for for being here. Now, I'm glad Officer Lilly is here. I mean, I don't have any problems today. All right, so we have another, also, I'm sorry, let me acknowledge the principal, Principal Wade of this school. Please stand, Principal Wade, the Banneker Elementary and Marquette. I'm still working on getting that name right with the changes. And she has members of her team. You know, I don't think I've ever been to a community meeting inside of a Gary Community School Corporation school. And I thought, look, it's important that we engage with our schools. Many of you have never been inside of here. And so it's good to see what's happening in the schools and connect school and community together. So Dr. McNulty was gracious enough to work with the principal, and security here, custodian here, in a very clean and spacious environment. So hopefully we'll do this again. Thank you, Principal Wade. Okay, we have another guest. Our Director of Constituent Services, Rachel Caesar Morgan.
All right, that's Morgan Caesar. I like your doctor. Good evening. I am Rachel Caesar. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me here tonight. As the councilman said, I am the city's director for the Office of Constituent Services. It's not a new office in the city of Gary, but this year is the first year it has been active under the current administration. So this is our first foray into this space. What Constituent Services does, a large part of it is serving as the information portal for the residents and the constituency groups for the city of Gary. Certainly the residents sit at the center of that, but there are other constituency groups, external government officials, the council even, and really everybody who works, lives, and does business in the city of Gary. What we attempt to do is to provide timely and accurate information regarding programs and services in the city, and to really try to connect residents with services they may need. And that ranges across a very broad spectrum. I have, as Camille pointed out, we have spoken probably with a number of you in this room, so by the time that a resident gets to my office, they probably haven't been successful in connecting with other offices or getting what they need. 311 is a bit of a, I won't say it's a contradiction, but it's a bit of a contradiction in that it works from a software perspective. It does exactly what it is designed to do. What is often the challenge between, because your vision of 311 working is when you actually get the service that you request. I get that part. But the lack or the deficit in resources that the city really still does have can impact the delivery of those services. Not only just the resources themselves, I think we try to, it makes sense to deliver those services in the order that they are received, but a number of things can impact that. Staffing can impact that, equipment can impact that, emergencies can impact that, general services. And I can speak a little bit about that space because I have worked in it previously, but I know that you can have a plan for the day and end up doing nothing that's on that plan, even though you've been working all day, and I think we all understand that. So yes, it works as a software system. Yes, we need more resources in order for it to work more effectively. So I'll say that on 311. It does live in the space of constituent services. We encourage residents to use it. I know some of the, what I would say, the frequently contacted departments, and that's going to be code enforcement, general services, probably public works, or police, I should say, the non-emergency calls are routed to the dispatch. So we really don't use 311 in the public safety space. And of course, if it's an emergency, you're going to dial 911. Gary Sanitary District, and this is noteworthy, is not a part of the system either. They have their own separate system that they use over there in order to kind of triage and deal with GSD-related issues across the city. So that's kind of, I did leave some brochures to kind of introduce the department and give you an overview of what we do. So I hope you'll take a look at that. All of the contact information is here. Reach out via phone. I encourage you to use the email. I try to be responsive to all of the calls that come into constituent services, because I'm mindful that by the time you call constituent services, you've probably already been around to more departments or talked to more people than you probably should have. So we are mindful of that. That's the broad overview. Oh, the All in Gary initiative is born out of that space as well. We just had a really successful cleanup over the last, I think it was the 16th and the 17th, actually, a week ago. So we continue to encourage community organizations, block clubs. I think it's no secret that as a community, Miller is very well organized, and we appreciate that. In a lot of ways, you serve as a model for the rest of the city. So, but we still encourage you to be involved and be engaged, and just to, as the councilman said, it's really going to take us all across the city to bring about the kind of change we want to see. Any questions you have, I'll be happy to try to answer. I'm sorry. Oh, they are, Ms. Smith will get one for you. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. We'll go over a few other issues and concerns, and then of course we'll take any additional questions that you have. I want to note that our American Rescue Plan Act funding is moving along quite well. As I've said before in mailers and in meetings and in council meetings and committee meetings, the city received in 2 increments roughly $81 million starting last May. Now that's historic, right? For a direct allocation of funding that did not pass through the state. That has not happened since the 70s. And so regardless of your politics, we have to thank President Biden and Congressman Rivera, our elected officials, for supporting that, because that really gave a boost to the city of Gary and to many cities around this country. Just to give you an example, we funded a great portion of our police officers and firefighters out of ARPA, because that's an allowable expense. There are other allowable expenses. I know some people think, I've gotten some emails, that paving is one of them. We were able to do more paving than usual this year for one simple reason. The American Rescue Plan Act has a component in it called revenue recovery. The idea being is that cities during COVID, because things weren't open, you couldn't have events and so forth, maybe not as much parking revenue, that you could basically write the general fund of the city a check. And ours came out to a little over $10 million. And out of that $10 million, we paid health insurance, premiums, we were able to pay city staff and kind of do some relief from the burden on the general fund. We were also able to allocate an additional roughly $2.3 million toward paving. Now, that may sound like a lot of money to some of you, but it's not. Our paving, first of all, there's not a lot of competitors in that space. So Milestone, you've seen the signs around, is the contractor that was chosen. We paid roughly $35,000 to $45,000 a block, right? And so when you think about a city that is 400 miles of linear road, you're only going to get so much done. So we were able to do a little more than usual in terms of the residential streets. In the next communication that I send out, I will give a detailed list of what streets are covered with this new paving. I don't want to get into that this evening. But as you've seen the signs in Edna, Glen Ryan, and Miller, there will be a significant amount of residential paving. Did want to speak specifically about projects we've been able to get done. Out of that $81 million, you know, if you traveled on Lake Street the last few years, there's been a lot of construction in terms of street resurfacing and sidewalks and a Main Street sort of model, complete streets model for Lake Street in terms of making it a vibrant retail, restaurant, live, work, play space. And so the last part of that, which will stretch the Lake Street beach, needed to be funded. And so I sponsored an ordinance of $6.5 million, which received unanimous support of the council. Now, why that is important, thank you. Why that's important is that this is the first time, and I see Representative Hatcher, who used to be on the council, that the first district only has one person out of the 9 on the council. So when you vote, you elect 4 people to the council. 1 district person and 3 at large. Now the at large folks get off the hook, and we get blamed for everything in the district. But they're able to float and get involved where and when they desire. But that being said, our at-large council persons live in the 2nd district, the 3rd district, and the 4th district. And there was a time where all of them were from the 1st district. Cal Allen and Reagan Hatcher and Ward Pratt. And so that has changed. And so the ability to get things done on the council for our district, which sometimes gets the rep of being entitled, this is what I have to deal with, being bossy and demanding, it can be difficult. Because as much as you may want to blame any one individual, nothing in this city happens in terms of funding if I can't get 5 votes on the council. So I have to support other people on the council. I can't just say if it's not for me, I don't want it. Some of my people don't like that. So this is a give and take. But we were able to get $6.5 million to finish the Lake Street project all the way to Lake Street Beach. On top of that, there's an ordinance that's now floating to fix Sixth Place in Howard, which, as many of you know, is a major detour route, and it's in terrible condition. One of our constituents, Jennifer Taylor, has done a wonderful job with the Sparkle House project. Now, if you've driven by there, you can't miss the house. But that house was featured on WGN, I believe. I was interviewed a few months ago. It's an Airbnb. We've been not going to get into that yet. But it's also an art space where people can come. This house was slated to be condemned. But she purchased it, I believe, for $2,000 and raised the money and used her own money in order to turn a condemned property into now something that people pay a lot of money and come from many places to live in. So we're hoping that we will pass that $1.5 million allocation to repair that street and make it beautiful as well. So that's $8 million. Mobile mental health. And I think I saw Ms. Charlotte Hawkins and Ms. Robin Rich and there are others with the Interfaith Alliance. They've been working on this. I think we first started having meetings August of last year, maybe July of last year, on the mobile mental health. We met a couple weeks ago again after an initial committee meeting. What this is a way for us to get licensed clinical social workers out into the street. And we have a serious mental health crisis that's happening all over our country, but in our city and in this district. You don't have to, you just pay attention. There's a lot of challenge. And our police get a lot of calls, which are mental health related. And we want to ensure that they have the skills and training, but also where necessary, the supportive services to bring people along. Because some activities are not criminal, they're a matter of health. And getting people the help that they need. So that's a $1.5 million allocation. There will be a Ways and Means Committee meeting on October 11th. So if you're interested in that project and learning more about it, you know, Robin is here. I know I saw Ms. Hawkins as well. And Pam Johnson is here. They're here, and if you want to get involved, I'm sure they'd be happy to speak with you about it. I'm sponsoring that ordinance. Also, you may have heard about the YMCA in Tolleson Park. And as I said in my communication, it's not in the first district, but it's in the city of Gary. And according to the YMCA, there are roughly 3,000 YMCA members who live in the city of Gary, but are obviously going to neighboring cities to participate in the Y. The council has allocated and appropriated $10 million of the American Rescue Plan Act to go toward a partnership that includes the State Ready Grant. So the state is pitching in $10 million, which is unorthodox because typically these grants are $1 million, $2 million. And also the Dean and Barbara White Foundation. Mr. Bill Hanna, met with him several times on this, is also contributing $10 million for a total of $30 million. So the project is going to cost more than that for the landscaping and also the ongoing maintenance and upkeep. And so they're pledging to kick in an additional $5 to $10 million, that's the White Foundation, to sustain the project. Methodist Hospital is also at the table to build a medical facility on the site because the notion is you want to encourage recreation, encourage physical fitness as a preventive measure for high blood pressure and diabetes and cholesterol and obesity and all the other factors that cost the healthcare system. And Methodist, as you know, obviously, is our main healthcare provider. So that project was approved this week at the Tuesday night council meeting. So that is also going on. We have in the pipeline additional projects related to small businesses. In March, I was invited to speak at the Gary Chamber of Commerce. Now, as part of that, I've said this before, there has historically been a dividing line, a rift, between the Gary Chamber of Commerce and the Miller Business Association. Now, that just shouldn't be, right? So our neighbors, we live in the city of Gary. I think everyone needs to be clear about that. This is a neighborhood in the city of Gary. Many neighborhoods, Etna, Miller, Glenline, Emerson, Tolleson, Glen Park, and so forth. But that notwithstanding, the Miller Business Association sent a delegation of people, and I requested that they do that, to come to the Gary Chamber and to begin working together. We cannot succeed operating on islands. And so what I challenged them to do, the Miller Business Association, the Gary Chamber of Commerce, and the Urban League of Northwest Indiana, which Urban Leagues, as you know, have a small business and entrepreneurship component, are working together on a $2.5 million project to boost business in Gary. So that will include entrepreneurship training, that will include grants to startups as well as existing small businesses, that will include tourism. And there are some exciting plans that we're working on, as Peggy Blackwell with Visit Miller Beach and other stakeholders within the community to do some exciting things potentially with our Miller Town Hall. But just stay tuned on that in terms of the details. So that's a project that's in the pipeline. Many of you during COVID had to go to our health department for the first time to get your COVID shot and booster as I did. And we know that health department is not up to par. And that was revealed to us strongly during the pandemic. And so I suggested to our Ways and Means Committee Chair, Councilwoman Atkins, as well as the director of the health department, that we need to build a new health department that is on a two-way street, not on a one-way street, and that has the space and capacity to deal with the serious, and I'm not just talking about COVID, but the serious public health challenges from STIs and across the board that our community faces. So if you're familiar with those statistics, we're high up there on a lot of those health statistics. And that's going to be about $5 million. The long of it is, the short of it is, we're trying to do, and I'm supporting projects that will have a long-term benefit and impact on this city. What I don't want to see is us just spending a lot of money and there's nothing to show for it. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. So let's do some things that will help people. That's why we're doing mobile mental health. Let's do some things that will bring business here and keep business here. That's why we're doing a small business collaboration. Let's make the necessary infrastructure improvements where the law allows us to, because we can do water, sewer, and broadband according to the Treasury Department regulation. That's why we're doing the Lake Street project. And we're also improving our audio visual. Because one of the things we also found out in the pandemic is that it was very difficult to communicate. The day I took office, January 1, 2020, the swearing in was recorded, but you couldn't hear it. There was no audio. So we inherited a broken system. And so we had COVID to happen. And we met on Zoom, we met on GoToMeeting, and all of you have suffered trying to hear and watch our council meetings when they were completely online, when it was hybrid, and now that we're back in the chamber. And so we've allocated $250,000 to bring in a first-rate technology system so that we can hear and you can hear and see. Because that's our number one responsibility. That the public can hear what laws are being debated, what laws are being passed. Now I know a lot of people look at the council person and they go, he can fix my street. I really can't do that. I could stand up here and make you a lot of promises. That's the executive branch, right? So the stuff I do is ordinances. If you look at the state constitution, that's the power I have, is to write ordinances, to review ordinances, to review the budget, which is what we're doing right now. That's the power of a city council person, which is equivalent to a state legislator, just at the micro city level. So we want to make sure our meetings you can hear them and you can see them. So that's just a sample of some of the projects. There are more. We're doing a project around nonprofits where they will be able to apply for grants. We have a lot of nonprofits within this district and the Manor Revitalization Program, Miller Beach Arts and Creative District, Miller Historical Society, Miller Garden Club, Miller Citizens Corporation, right? That are doing a lot of different work. Friends of Glen Ryan Neighbors. And they need resources in order to stay open, because in many cases, I'm venting a little bit. When I sit on the council and I'm asking for things for this district, and Lori knows it, and the city department heads know it, I'm there at those Miller people. They already did everything. They got everything out there. And as bad as you think we may have it in this district, just drive around the city. There's a lot of need in these 54 square miles. And I know there's a lot of things that we want on our streets. My street is bumpy too, right? But we have to look at the whole picture in terms of how we move this ship along. And so I remind people that a lot of the flower pots you see and the art that you see, this is not the city of Gary funding this. This is volunteer activity. And I'm going to say this as well. I think it's pretty clear right now. I don't mind to saying what I think, and if I end up in the newspaper, that's okay too. The median income in this district is higher than any other district in this city. And with that, there's a lot of discretionary income. That means that there's a lot of folks who have an extra $1,000 a year to give to the garden club or give to the MBA. That's not the case all over this city. And yes, there are some great people all over this city. But we cannot ignore the fact that this is where the $1 million homes are. And there's a certain amount of discretionary income and discretionary time that comes with that. And so when the city is making investments all over, we have to have that citywide perspective. I just want to be clear on that when we're doing these projects and as we move forward. We're in the middle of the city budget. We met Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night to hear from all the various departments. And as I said earlier, we're looking at raises because we're trying to keep our employees. And we're trying to hire employees. I recommended that we pay the city attorneys more, because they're the people who have to go to court to defend the city and to help move these cases forward. when you talk about code enforcement, right? You have to have attorneys that will do that. So we want to make increases there. We got to make increases into our code enforcement officers. We've lost 2 or 3 of our HR, human resources personnel, within the last couple months in neighboring cities, where they've increased their salary $10,000, $20,000. Police and fire, last year, we made an historic raise of 12%. People said, how are you going to pay for it? I said, we don't have an option. We're down to 145 police officers and roughly the same amount, roughly, of firefighters. Hammond just put out a notice that they're hiring police officers, starting pay, $70,000. Our pay, $55,000. And that's after the 12% raise that the council passed last year. So folks, we have to make tough decisions about how we're going to move this city forward. And when I see folks like Walter McCoy, who's on our fire commission, and Adam Hill, who's on the redevelopment commission, and David Harriman, who's also working on a commission that we're trying to put some life back into, there's a lot of challenge. I want to also talk about the public safety ordinances. As many of you know, the Indiana State Police has entered into a partnership with the Gary Police Department. I have no problem with that partnership. But what I will not stand for is an outsider state superintendent coming into the city council and telling us how fast we should review 17 ordinances that were put on our desk all at once. Just pass it. Make it quick. Don't ask too many questions. Ms. McCarr on the fire commission, she was there. I will continue to ask questions. I will continue to demand answers. Because when the state superintendent helicopters out of here, back to Indianapolis, and when they leave, guess who's going to have to deal with the problems and the grievances and losing officers and not being competitive because our rules are not in sync with our competitors? Us. And some people have political points to prove, and they're trying to show what they can do and boost their resume. Do it, but I will continue to do my job. And Councilwoman Brown said the same thing, Councilman Lay said the same thing, Councilwoman Atkins said the same thing. And so we're going to continue to follow these changes that are being demanded. Just to give you an example, there's an ordinance, they want to reduce the quorum of the police commission. Instead of being 4 out of 6, they want it to be 3 out of 6. That means less citizen engagement in hiring and discipline, terminations of police officers. Or it's about having proxies, because they want the police commission members to become the hearing officers. Right now we use attorneys who are trained to hear these cases. And they want to just use the commissioners as hearing officers, but as part of that, have proxies. Well, anyone knows you have to have continuity. You can't have one hearing officer one day and another one the next day. So there's a lot of issues, and I'll just give you one more. We were told just last week in a public safety hearing that you don't have to worry about the police commission getting less responsibility and the chief getting more responsibility, because the police commission is basically going to design the SOPs, the standard operating procedures. They're going to approve them. Okay. So I asked the attorney for the city, and our own attorney, who also represents the Police and Fire Commission, when is the last time that the police commission has voted on the chief's SOPs? That's the guidelines for discipline. What happens when an officer does a certain thing? They said never. The commission does not vote on the chief's SOPs. I said, but you just said that that's what will happen. So show me in these ordinances where that is. Started flipping pages, and people started whispering and go to a particular section, and instead of approve, it says review. There's a big difference between reviewing what somebody shows you and approving it. Now, the state superintendent came and said he just couldn't imagine what was going on, how we were engaging in semantics. Now, that's semantics, but semantics have consequences if you are a council person that's not paying attention. And that's when people put that much in front of you in the middle of budget season, in the middle of these ARPA ordinances, that's how things get overlooked. But we're not going to do that. And so our next, thank you. Our next public safety hearing will be October 12th at 5:30 p.m. in City Hall. Of course, it'll be online, but you can also come down in person to participate. Short-term rentals in your packet. And if you're not getting this memo, please reach out to Ms. Sherry Smith to ensure your address is on the list. But in this packet, I asked the Corporation Council to put together a sample ordinance that would be in compliance with Indiana state law. And so I want to present this ordinance in October and take it through the process and ideally have a version of it passed by November. So that in January, when we do our rental registration process for all landlords, whether it's a month or 5 years, you're supposed to have your properties registered with the city at $5 per unit. That's low because state law dictates how much the city can charge per unit. But I want to have that in place so that we can find out who the owners of these properties are. Let me just say this. You know, I look at a lot of it. I stopped looking at some of it for my own health on Nextdoor. But this is not about vilifying people who own short-term rentals. Most of the short-term rentals, and I live next door to one, are not a problem. There are some that are. And it's not just in Miller Beach or Etna or Gary. It's all over the country. We happen to live in a state, one of 5, that is extremely short-term rental friendly. And has said that cities can only do so much in terms of regulating these entities. You can't say we don't own any more than 2 or 3 on our block. If it is a habitable property and it has the stuff that it has to have, just like in a 1-year rental, you can't say it can't exist. But what we can do is require that they pay a $150 initial fee, and that if they're not living in that property, they have to come before the city and get a permit to operate it. If they get 3 violations on their property, they can lose their permit. It can be revoked. All that being said, I want to be clear that people can still sue, right, to get their permit when the council or the city department does not grant it to them if they feel like their state rights have been violated. All that being said, I would ask you to review it. If you have suggestions, please email them to me. I prefer that way I have it in writing. I have a record of your concerns or questions related to short-term rentals. There'll be more to say about that. Questions? Everybody must be tired. Mr. Gilman.
When the state police came in, weren't those just recommendations?
No, it's ordinances, laws.
Okay, who wrote them? Who wrote them?
They did.
Okay, so you have the ability to review them 1, 2, 3 times and couch them, if you please.
If you please, but you know, if you look at our agenda, most of the time on first reading we might have 5 ordinances, no more than 10, not 17. And 2 of my colleagues, Councilman Lay and Councilwoman Brown, publicly criticized me, and they both support me, for even assigning them to a committee. Because of how ridiculous it is to present that many ordinances to a body at one time. Anybody who's tried to restructure an organization knows that you don't do it overnight. It is an incremental, certainly a public agency that has a union, it is an incremental process.
But you're the president, and you dictate that.
I assigned them as a show of goodwill because they say I'm an obstructionist. I assigned them to the Public Safety Committee, on which I sit, And I asked the chair, Councilman Brewer, to take his time. No, he doesn't have to take his time, right? But he is deciding to do that. But in our second meeting, we're only halfway through. We were told, you're taking too long, you're asking too many questions, just trust us, we know what we're doing, we're police, you aren't. A council person is not an expert in everything, but you ought to be able to read and ask questions.
Can I ask one more question to
Yeah.
the code enforcement officer?
Yes,
I mean, we all know what Jennifer
she thought she was off the hook.
Yeah, we all know what Jennifer Taylor has done with Sparkle House, and we all applaud her. The tremendous amount of sweat equity she put into that property. And right on Howard and Fourth there, that is somewhat of an emergency corridor if there's a train stop or a pass-through for us that know that pass-through. And for code enforcement, there are several vehicles. I'd like to know the criteria. Is it just on the sidewalk and flat tires, or there's others? There's multiple vehicles that there's no way you could possibly drive them because they are completely packed with garbage. There's multiple vans on the north side of the street, multiple trucks on the south side of the street, and they are most definitely an eyesore, and I personally feel a health hazard because of the animals around.
Well, if they're considered, if they look junk, abandoned, no plates, expired plates, if it's been sitting there for a long time.
5 years.
5 years, are the plates turned on?
I don't want to get that close to it.
Okay. If you give me the address or give me the area, I will go out and check it out and see what's going on. Each resident is only allowed up to 4 vehicles per resident or 50%. That's what the law is, the ordinance is. So if they have more than that many vehicles, then we can cite them for that.
I think they're under that number. They're
Okay.
under, it's the condition.
The condition.
And we've all
Yes.
driven down that road, and we all know what vehicles I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's kind of touchy because I have a young lady, I'm dealing with an attorney right now. She doesn't even live here, but she played the vehicle and has been sitting there for a long time. The officer would not tow it because the plates were coming. So it's a thing of you making some noise or saying something or calling down to the police department because the attorney is so livid because the vehicle's just sitting there and has not moved for a long time. So I cannot break the law. My thing is, only thing my department can do is tag it or issue a citation. The police department is the only one that can tow the vehicle. So that's something you would have to contact the police department and talk to the chief or who's over patrol.
Well, we might have, just think about it. Increased activity from tagging to ticketing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It sounds like you get things a lot done quicker.
Yes, with the
right?
tickets,
When you
yes.
start with the ticket.
Yes.
And I just encourage
So like I
anyone.
said, if you give me the area, I will get a police officer to go out with me and see if we can issue tickets.
On the same block as the Sparkle House. From
Okay,
Howard to Lake.
I'm sorry, I don't live in the.
Fourth Street.
Fourth and.
Yeah. Fourth and Howard.
Fourth and Howard.
Between
Okay.
Lake, yeah.
Okay.
You can't miss it.
Princeton, he knows the area very well, he
Okay.
stays in there, so I will have him to go out with me.
Oh, it's 6th and Howard, I'm
Six
sorry.
and Howard,
6th and Howard.
6 and Howard. Okay, I will have him to go out with me because he knows the area,
Thank you.
well, and we will see about doing something there.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Dr. Simpson.
When will the Lake Street project actually start? That they marked that rebuilt the lagoon about 15 times to the county, and actually it's controlled by the Shore Patrol,
You're talking about the Lake Street Bridge or?
bridge, and the whole Lake Street bridge.
Right. So I'm waiting to hear from Dan Vicari, who is leading that effort. So depending on how soon they're able to secure a contractor, then it will either be this fall or next spring. But as soon as we know, we will definitely make sure everyone is aware. Yes.
All right, my name is Leah Hope.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
I've lived here for 23 years. I live in the same spot. I live in the same position that you were in. What's next door to me is the Airbnb, whatever. I live on a corner, which is an alley, and it's little to no access. But my question to you about ordinance all it is, real there is certain ordinances, I know it's short term, for these Airbnbs, because my children are small anymore, but I still have children. And different neighbors every weekend is an issue for me with children. And just not knowing is also an issue for me with children. And I also work here, live here, and I have children.
So what we're able to do is for properties that are serious, primarily and only investments, so the homeowner doesn't live there, that if they have to register, just like any other property, right? Because we have some one-year rentals that are problematic, right? That if they get 3 code violations, their permit can be revoked. Now, there has to be a hearing procedure if you revoke it. So they can explain what happened, but if there's obviously a pattern of bad behavior that's been documented in writing, then they can lose their permit to operate their Airbnb or short-term rental. But we're limited, because some cities have banned it altogether, right? Or limited the number you can have on any block or in any neighborhood. Indiana does not give us the home rule authority as a city to do that. Yes?
So you cannot say, you have it's a rental, you understand, but they cannot renovate or throw a paid party, because now that's a nightclub. If
So-
they're selling alcohol in there, and they're paid to get into the party, in order to replace it,
Well, that would be a police call, right? I mean, so the property owner would be responsible for, hosting a party, for violating the noise ordinance. If they're using their place as basically a public place of amusement and as a business without a license, then that becomes a law problem for them. And so I would encourage residents to call the police, document safely what you are observing for the record, but you definitely want to file a police report so that there is a record of the activity. All right? Now, some people have parties at their house, right? You live in, so,
you're not charging people to get in.
right.
And you're not making them pay for the alcohol. That's a nightclub.
I hear you. I hear you. So, okay. I think we're going to wrap it up. I thank everybody for coming. Let me just note that we'll be on the radio, WLTH, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. With Natalie Ammons, WLTH. We have our next council meeting on October 4th. And our next Ways and Means Committee meeting with all these ARPA ordinances on October 11th. So thanks again to the Gary Community School Corporation, Mr. Cliff Caldwell with security, Principal Wade, and the entire Gary Community School Corporation family. Thank you to Rachel and Millie with our constituent services team and our code enforcement team, and to our media department and my staff, Sherry, for helping us have this meeting. Thank you.